Hopefully this should come as no surprise to anyone who watches these videos, but I try to use things that happen on a day-to-day basis in my real life to help feed ideas for these videos. Admittedly, I do sometimes hit writer's block or I struggle with ideas for videos, and then I will kind of leverage things that are happening, problems, things that I'm just struggling with. I'll try to pull that in and make a video for you guys. And sometimes those videos are they're not quite 100% baked, because me doing the research and me kind of going through the journey of understanding, it might take months to get on the other side of that, admittedly. But I think that it is good fodder for content. Hopefully it helps spring conversations. Again, there is a kind of a growing audience for this channel, but also my employees watch these videos. And one of the things that I've been hearing a little bit lately is, oh my God, wouldn't it be funny if I took this video and sent it to one of my customers? Please do. That's the idea. None of this is ever said with hostility. I always try to approach what I'm saying in these videos with understanding of multiple points of view. And sometimes it gets a little uncomfortable, or it might be hard to bring some of these ideas up in a direct conversation with someone. So here is this artifact stamped at some point throughout the course of the year that somebody can send to a customer or whomever, and it could help maybe facilitate a more honest conversation. So I encourage you, either if you're an employee of mine, if you're a complete random stranger that's watching this video and you're nodding your head and you're saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wish I could send that to one of my customers. Do it. This video is about common misconceptions with your procurement team and some counterpoints to that. Let's hit it. The first misconception that I want to address is that the procurement person that you're working for is a mindless drone of savings, that the sole objective that the procurement person is working towards is to save money. I'm going to admit something to you, and some of my bosses and peers may cringe when I say this. My number one objective in my current state in life and my current career and the type of commodities that I buy, my number one objective is not always savings. It's probably almost never savings at this point. I would love to sit here and tell you that savings was the number one objective every single time, but there are so many other complexities to onboarding a supplier, to validating risks, to validating the fact that the supplier may or may not have breaches and liability protection. Those are so much more important, that the supplier is actually safe to do business with and that they scale from a safety perspective with my business. That's almost always my priority now versus I want to save a couple of bucks. We'll get to that later. Sometimes customers just don't understand the risks of doing business with certain suppliers, or any supplier for that matter, especially if we are taking customer data, people that are paying us, and we're putting that data on some other third party's platform. A lot of people don't understand the ramifications. They'll just sit there and say, well, I'm only spending $5,000. I'm only spending $10,000. It's a little nothing deal. And that may be right, but if you're putting 10,000 customer records on that platform and there's a breach, that could be a real big problem. So that is generally the first thing that I try to convey to customers that may have an aggressive timeline. And again, this happens everywhere. This is not unique to procurement at all, but in a lot of situations, people don't even think to engage procurement. And the thing about procurement is that we are generally conveners for a multitude of matrix partners. So we may be the initiation point to contact legal, to contact information protection, to contact other security and risk organizations. So we're a kickoff point. And again, somebody might just be sitting there and saying, why does it need to take so long? I could just take out my corporate credit card and buy this thing and be done because it's only $5,000. It's only $10,000. But again, we're concerned for you. We're concerned for your customers, and we want to make sure that the place where you're putting all this information and all these records is safe. And it's not only safe for now, it's safe for the future, and it's also safe to grow. That's also a problem. You may have bought something 5 years ago in a very limited use case, and you say, well, We're already doing business with that supplier. We already have a master agreement with that supplier. What's the problem? But we never intended to use it the way that you may want to use it. And now we have to go out and renegotiate a master contract, or we have to renegotiate a significant amount of terms to make that supplier safe to do business with. And a lot of people don't think about that. And I'm okay with that. I understand that that's not what you're thinking about. You're thinking about how to get your business running and how to be as efficient as humanly possible. But a lot of time when people hear delays from procurement, or if procurement is trying to slow something down, people always naturally assume it's strictly about the dollars. And I would say 85, 90% of the time, it isn't in my world. It's not about the dollars, it's about everything else. Along those lines about saving money, there's another thing that I suspect my customers get annoyed with, which is when we tend to push back when they want to onboard a new supplier. Onboarding a new supplier, as I mentioned in the first point, is a very time-consuming process because we have to negotiate a new master agreement. We have to validate risks. We have to go through information protection. We have to go through other risk aversion departments or risk detection departments. And again, every company is set up differently. But there's usually multiple departments, including legal and information protection. And there's usually another risk management organization. There might be other things depending on the type of business that you have. And onboarding a net new supplier, it's very time consuming for all of those organizations. So again, I do software most of the time and I do IT labor. And one of the things that I usually tell my customers, especially for software engagements, a net new master agreement can take up to 6 months to negotiate and people lose their minds. I like to check and see what is in our current inventory and current roster of suppliers to see if we have a product or a service provider that can fundamentally do the same thing so we don't have to onboard a new supplier. It's hard to come up with a number, but in general, for a large corporation, I would say that an onboarding process can take up to $100,000 when you're dealing with multiple business units, engagement, processes, financial onboarding, W-9s, clearing all of that stuff. If you have a formal and robust procurement process, legal process, risk management process, and all of these people are touching the suppliers, that particular supplier, it could take up to $100,000. Let's also not forget, if you are looking at potential international labor providers, and your information protection department has to go and check out their data center or their work centers, that could get very expensive and it can get very time consuming. And again, the customers are just like, I just want my thing and I just want to move on and I want to be agile in my business. But this is the other side of that conversation. So if you can leverage an existing arrangement, an existing contract, an existing product, you're going to be able to consume faster. It may not be 100% the thing that you want, but if it's 85 or 90% the thing that you want, and you already have an established rate card and you already have an established contract structure, you may want to pivot to the existing thing. And if your company doesn't have a review board, a solution review board that checks and validates those things, it may be something that you want to discuss with your management. So everyone is coming together and looking at these solutions to see if you should be buying 5 or 6 or 7 of the same thing, or if you can live with just 1 or 2. By the way, I want to be clear. I'm not advocating for absolute sole source structures. You always want a little bit of competition. You always want a backup plan so you have an opportunity to pivot and you're not entirely stuck if somebody starts misbehaving. The last misconception that I would like to cover for this particular video is the idea that procurement wants to cut the customers out of the conversation with the supplier. Now I'm going to tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. I've used this analogy before. We need a dance partner. When we are talking with the supplier, we need to make sure that our customers are fully in sync with the conversations that we're having with the vendors. But customers, it's important for you to be somewhat detached from the conversations with the supplier. Good cop, bad cop scenario at its core. You have to continue to use the services and use the product and talk to the supplier and convey your needs, your wants. You should have a more friendly relationship with the person that you or the company that you're consuming product from. So you should let the procurement department be the bad guys. But all of these conversations about what the bad guys are doing should be happening. The conversation should be laid out. The script should be laid out, right? These are the things that you need. These are the things that you want. This is the maximum amount of budget that you can allocate. And then let the procurement department be the ones that are conveying those messages so you can remain somewhat neutral. It sets up a good dynamic where you're the good guys, the procurement people are the bad guys. As the supplier comes back and they come back with different pricing, ultimately you're the decision maker and you're viewed as the decision maker, but they have to get through certain gates and they have to make sure that their offers pass a certain degree of logic before it can get to you. Is it more time consuming? Yes. Does it add more complexity? Yes. Does it typically work? Yes. We can't do our job without you, the customer. We don't know what you want, right? We can sit down and talk about it, but we have to have a constant communication about what is being asked for, what ultimately needs to be bought, and why you are buying that specific thing. Context is important. I see this a lot where it's a completely net new customer, it's a net new product, and they're just like, get the thing done, we need it done in a week or a month or whatever. And you're like, why? And customers are like, why do you need to know that, procurement people? But it helps to know what is driving your business. It helps us go out and look at the market to see if there's competition. And here's another thing that people tend to react to. Just because a procurement team is saying we want to put something out to bid, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get the supplier that you want. But wouldn't it be good to go out and do a market analysis? What happens if that other company that isn't even remotely as good as your preferred choice, but maybe they're good enough for the thing that you're trying to do? And maybe they're good enough in that scope where they're going to be viable competition. So the supplier that is your primary knows that they have to be a little bit more competitive with pricing. They have to be a little bit more receptive to the feedback. Competition is good. Let your procurement team create competition. At the end of the day, your procurement team, we're not the decision makers. Yes, we uphold certain policies, but at the end of the day, you're the one that is making the decisions. And just give us the opportunity to help you have more options and to have more leverage. Things can get heated, especially when there are deadlines. We understand. But let's all slow it down. Let's look at the options that are on the table and let your procurement team give you more flexibility and more options to potentially save some money. And if you're not feeling something, let us know. Most customers are usually not shy about feedback. But generally understand, we're not doing these things to keep ourselves busy. Most procurement departments are understaffed. So the idea of doing an RFP, the idea of having more meetings with suppliers, the idea of having more conversations and coordination, that's more labor for us that we don't have. But we genuinely care. We care about you. We care about your outcomes. We're trying to do the best things for you and for the company. I've talked enough for this particular video. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you find it useful. And again, procurement professionals, don't be afraid to send this to your customers, to your friends, to your suppliers. The suppliers are going to see this and they're going to be nodding their heads too. We all know what this dance looks like, right? No surprises. Let's all just be rational human beings. Let's all be calm and let's figure out how to move as efficiently as possible so no one's getting too stressed out. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and I'll be back with another video in 2 weeks. Take care.